Today, we're uncovering the twisted story of a man who thought he could fake his own kidnapping to escape a life he no longer wanted. But when real criminals intercepted his plan, what began as a calculated lie turned into a deadly game of betrayal, ransom, and survival, with consequences no one had prepared for, and a final outcome far darker than anyone could have imagined. You are watching True Crime Excavate, your portal for gripping explorations into the world of real crime. Here, we dissect chilling cases, delve into unsolved mysteries, and recount tales of scandal and deception. Subscribe and become part of a community dedicated to unraveling mysteries and seeking justice. On the evening of February 17, 2023, Tyrone Ellis, a 43-year-old accountant from Los Angeles, left his office in the financial district at approximately 5:40 p.m. He had worked for over a decade at Klein & Foster Tax Associates, a mid-sized firm known for handling complex individual and corporate filings. Colleagues later described him as reliable and disciplined, a man of routine who typically left work around the same time each day. That Friday was no different. Ellis clocked out, exited the building, and walked toward the structure where he parked his car. Tyrone never arrived home. By 9 p.m., his wife, Melinda Ellis, contacted emergency services to report him missing. In her statement to dispatchers, she stressed that her husband never deviated from his schedule and always called if he was delayed. She said it was unlike him to ignore texts, and he hadn't answered a single call since he was supposed to leave work. At 11:23 p.m., Los Angeles patrol officers located Tyrone's vehicle, a silver Toyota Camry, abandoned in a narrow alley just off Crenshaw Boulevard in the Hyde Park neighborhood. The driver's door was partially open. His phone and wallet were missing. There was no sign of blood, no broken glass, and no immediate indication of a struggle. What stood out, however, was a folded sheet of paper found inside the glove compartment. It contained a single printed message: "We have Tyrone Ellis. Bring $150,000 in cash or he dies. Do not call the police." The note was typed, free of grammatical or spelling errors, and printed on standard white paper. It bore no fingerprints, and no other identifying marks were found. Officers secured the scene and notified the Robbery Homicide Division, which officially opened a kidnapping investigation early the next morning. The Los Angeles Police Department escalated the case, citing the high likelihood that Tyrone had been abducted. Detectives contacted his employer and inner circle. His firm, Klein & Foster, issued a public statement and offered a $20,000 reward for information. Meanwhile, a GoFundMe page started by a family friend raised over $50,000 in under 72 hours, intended, according to the campaign, to contribute to the ransom demand if it was real. Investigators, however, noticed anomalies early in the case. First, there was no follow-up communication from the supposed kidnappers, no calls, no texts, and no further instructions regarding the ransom. Detectives found it unusual that someone would leave a typed note and then go silent. Secondly, there were no eyewitnesses. In a busy corridor like Crenshaw Boulevard, especially on a Friday night, an abduction involving a grown man should have generated attention, yet no such reports were filed. Moreover, the ransom note itself raised concerns. Its wording lacked the typical urgency or aggression seen in similar cases. It was clean, formulaic, and almost impersonal. Forensic linguists consulted by the department later described the note as unconvincing, suggesting that whoever wrote it may have been mimicking how they thought a ransom message should look rather than having actual experience in criminal extortion. Investigators also analyzed Tyrone's digital footprint. His phone had been powered off around 6:10 p.m., about 30 minutes after he left work. His last known location painted a cell tower near the alley where the car was found. There were no calls, texts, or app activity in the interim. Surveillance footage from the garage where he typically parked confirmed that he did, in fact, reach his vehicle and drive away. What happened after that point remained unclear. Police requested access to his email accounts and financial records. Melinda cooperated fully at this stage, handing over passwords and statements. Tyrone's most recent bank activity showed no large withdrawals or irregular spending, but detectives noticed that his credit cards were maxed out and his checking account had a balance of just over $200. The initial theory that Tyrone had been targeted for ransom began to waver. No new messages had arrived, and no one came forward with claims of responsibility. While the note demanded $150,000, investigators privately doubted whether anyone who truly expected to make someone disappear would do so without maintaining contact. Still, the LAPD followed protocol. The Ellis residence was placed under discreet surveillance. Calls to the Ellis family were monitored with their consent. The FBI was consulted, but no formal handover of the case occurred. Tyrone and Melinda Ellis had been married since 2010. They lived in a modest two-story home in Baldwin Hills and were active members of their local church and community board. Neighbors described them as polite, consistent, and low-profile. They attended services nearly every Sunday, hosted occasional barbecues, and seemed to maintain a stable and traditional marriage. However, after Tyrone's disappearance, that surface image began to erode. As detectives expanded their interviews to family, friends, co-workers, and church acquaintances, inconsistencies in the couple's home life began to surface. Several people reported that Melinda had been seen crying in her car after Sunday services. Others noted that Tyrone had started arriving late to work and leaving after hours, unusual for a man known for his punctuality. Detectives turned to the couple's finances to gain deeper insight. What they found painted a picture of growing instability. Tyrone's financial records showed he was struggling under the weight of multiple debts. 3 credit cards were at their limits, and 2 personal loans from online lenders were months past due. More significantly, there was an ongoing audit by the Internal Revenue Service related to a discrepancy in client tax filings during the 2021 season. It became clear that Tyrone was under substantial pressure. At work, co-workers noted that his behavior had changed over the past 6 months. He had become irritable and withdrawn, often eating lunch alone and skipping weekly staff meetings. A junior associate recalled Tyrone snapping at him over a routine data error. Others mentioned that he had stopped participating in the firm's mentoring program, which he had previously led for years. Melinda confirmed to investigators that Tyrone had voiced concerns about money. She recalled one specific evening in January when he said, "Sometimes I think about just walking away from everything." She claimed she had interpreted the remark as venting, nothing more. Investigators began reviewing Tyrone's digital life. With Melinda's permission, police accessed his email accounts and browsing history. What they discovered raised new questions. In a private email folder, detectives found a series of unsent draft messages with subject lines like, "If anything happens to me," and "To be opened in case of emergency." The contents varied but all included vague instructions about personal effects and references to unnamed individuals who might come asking questions. One draft included the line, "This isn't about Melinda. Don't blame her. I just couldn't fix it." Another warned, "No one is after me. I'm choosing this." While the LAPD did not make any public statements reflecting this theory, internally, the direction of the case shifted. If Tyrone had staged his own disappearance, what was the end goal? Escape from debt? A new life elsewhere? A temporary break? Then came a new lead that pushed the case in a very different direction. On February 21, a homeless man named David Quinones approached officers in Limer Park after seeing a flyer with Tyrone's face. He told detectives he had seen a man matching the description the night of February 17 near the alley where the Camry was found. Quinones reported that he had been resting in the alcove of a closed restaurant when he noticed a black SUV parked with its lights off. He observed a man in business attire carrying a small duffel bag approach the vehicle and get inside without resistance. According to Quinones, there was no shouting, no visible struggle. The man seemed calm and purposeful. When shown a photo of Tyrone, Quinones immediately identified him. His account, although uncorroborated by video evidence, aligned with other suspicious aspects of the case. Detectives reviewed footage from the general area but again found no visuals of Tyrone entering the SUV. However, Quinones's statement lent new credibility to the idea that the abduction was voluntary. If accurate, it meant Tyrone had not been taken against his will. On the morning of February 24, 2023, a call came into the LAPD tip line from a blocked number. The voice was male, distorted by software, and the message was short: "Check the warehouse off Alama Street." The caller provided no further details and disconnected before the operator could respond. Given the specificity of the location and the ongoing investigation into Tyrone Ellis's disappearance, the message was treated as credible. Officers from the Robbery Homicide Division were dispatched to a decommissioned industrial warehouse located near the intersection of Alama and 6th Street. The structure had not been in use since 2018 and was frequently reported as a site for trespassing and illegal dumping. Upon entry, detectives found no signs of habitation, struggle, or bodily remains. The building appeared vacant with trash and debris scattered across the floor. However, behind a row of rusted oil drums, investigators located a black leather briefcase, later confirmed to belong to Tyrone Ellis. Inside the case was a prepaid burner phone powered off, with no SIM card inserted. The briefcase's contents were processed forensically. No fingerprints were found on the burner phone besides Tyrone's. No DNA or hair samples were recovered from the inside or outside of the briefcase that did not match Tyrone's known profile. For all intents and purposes, it appeared that the briefcase had been deliberately placed there by Tyrone himself or by someone with direct access to his belongings. As the scene was being processed, the LAPD's digital forensics team received a new piece of information. A video submitted anonymously to a local news station showed surveillance footage from a Koreatown electronics store dated February 15. The footage clearly captured a man matching Tyrone's build and appearance purchasing a prepaid burner phone with cash. He wore sunglasses and a baseball cap, both common disguises meant to avoid facial recognition. The timestamp confirmed the purchase had occurred 2 days before his disappearance. At this point, investigators concluded with high confidence that Tyrone Ellis had orchestrated his own kidnapping. The facts supported this theory: his financial distress, the drafted emails about vanishing, the staged ransom note, and now the purchase and placement of a burner phone. Detectives speculated that Tyrone intended to disappear voluntarily, possibly to collect the ransom funds through a proxy and then escape undetected. The briefcase may have been planted to mislead investigators, buying time for him to execute the next phase of his plan. The situation, while unusual, was no longer without precedent. In 2016, a similar false kidnapping in San Diego had led to criminal charges once the target was found safe abroad. The LAPD was preparing to refocus their investigation from a kidnapping to a fraud case. That changed abruptly on the night of February 26. At approximately 6:42 p.m., Tyrone's parents, Charles and Lorraine Ellis, received a text message from an unknown number. The message read, "Deliver the money to Echo Park. 10 p.m. alone. No cops. Final warning." The text was riddled with spelling and grammatical errors. Unlike the original ransom note, this message was unformatted and rushed, sent from a device that was later determined to be untraceable. This new demand triggered an immediate and severe reassessment of the case. LAPD's behavioral analysts and communications experts noted significant differences between the original ransom note and this new message. The first had been methodical, deliberate, and formal. Police were now faced with a disturbing new possibility: Tyrone Ellis may have initially staged his disappearance but, at some point, lost control of the plan. If another party had become involved, someone not previously identified, it meant Tyrone could be in actual danger. A sting operation was considered for the scheduled exchange in Echo Park. Ultimately, the Ellis family declined to participate in a drop, citing safety concerns. Detectives canvassed the park in advance, deployed undercover officers in unmarked vehicles, and set up motion-activated surveillance in the most likely exchange locations. However, no suspect appeared at 10 p.m., and no one approached the Ellis family, who remained at home. The phone used to send the message was never turned on again. In the following days, LAPD investigators re-examined the digital traces left behind by Tyrone in the lead-up to February 17. Logs showed encrypted messaging activity through anonymous email platforms and dark web-adjacent chat forums. Tyrone had been in communication with at least one unidentified individual using the alias King West. The chat revealed that Tyrone had agreed to pay $15,000 for King West's services, an amount he intended to raise from the GoFundMe campaign and possibly the staged ransom. Payment was to be made in cryptocurrency. They discussed rendezvous points, digital identity wiping, and coordination via burner phones. Notably, Tyrone never used the chat to ask about King West's real identity, nor did the other party offer it. Their interactions remained transactional and anonymous. Through cooperation with federal cybersecurity analysts, LAPD tracked the metadata of the email headers and routing patterns. This led them to a series of proxy servers commonly used in online scams. After weeks of coordination and further digital tracing, authorities identified the real individual behind the alias, Andre Carson. Carson was a 36-year-old resident of East Hollywood with a criminal history that included attempted wire fraud, identity theft, and extortion. He had served time in county jail but had never been prosecuted at the federal level. Investigators concluded that Carson had initially agreed to help Tyrone fake his disappearance. But when he realized Tyrone was acting alone and was vulnerable, he chose to take full advantage. After Tyrone staged his abduction and went off-grid, Carson began tracking him using geolocation data from their prior communications and the burner phone Tyrone had used. Once he located him, sometime around February 19, Carson intercepted him. Detectives believe Tyrone was moved in the trunk or rear compartment of a vehicle east through Los Angeles. Cell tower data corroborated this movement, with pings from Tyrone's burner phone and Carson's personal phone placing them near Monterey Park, El Monte, and eventually Whittier over a span of 3 days. Surveillance footage from a freeway toll plaza showed a vehicle registered to a known associate of Carson traveling west to east on February 22. Consistent with this theory, further evidence emerged when detectives obtained security footage from an ATM in Bell Gardens. At approximately 11:08 p.m. on February 23, a visibly distressed Tyrone was seen withdrawing $400 in cash. His face was bruised, and his movements appeared hesitant. Behind him, outside the frame, a man loosely fitting Carson's description could be seen waiting. This was the last confirmed sighting of Tyrone Ellis alive. By now, the LAPD no longer classified Tyrone as a man faking his disappearance, he had become a hostage. Their suspect, Andre Carson, had transitioned from facilitator to perpetrator. As Carson realized the ransom scheme was unraveling, his behavior became more erratic. The second ransom demand sent to Tyrone's parents, rushed and riddled with errors, was traced back to a disposable phone purchased with cash at a liquor store in Southgate. CCTV footage from the store showed Carson making the purchase. He wore a hooded sweatshirt and gloves, but was identifiable through facial recognition software. With enough evidence to issue a warrant, detectives began tracking Carson's movements in real time. Surveillance teams were assigned to his known addresses and vehicles. However, Carson remained evasive. By the time officers reached one of his temporary residences, a rental unit in Pico Rivera, he had already vacated it. Inside, investigators found personal belongings, several empty food containers, and duct tape with biological material later confirmed to match Tyrone Ellis's DNA. This discovery led authorities to a grim conclusion: Tyrone had been held captive for at least several days after his staged disappearance. There were signs of restraint and likely physical assault. As the manhunt for Andre Carson intensified, so did scrutiny on the people closest to Tyrone Ellis, particularly his wife, Melinda. While she had initially appeared cooperative, detectives began to document a pattern of inconsistent behavior that raised significant red flags. Melinda had delayed responding to several routine requests from investigators, including authorization to access Tyrone's full phone records and banking history. She missed scheduled interviews, citing health issues and emotional distress. Detectives also noted her reluctance to engage with volunteers and media compared to her early, highly visible advocacy for the search effort. A voluntary polygraph test administered by a certified technician produced inconclusive results. Specifically, Melinda displayed elevated physiological responses when asked if she had knowledge of Tyrone's whereabouts or whether she had communicated with anyone involved in his disappearance. While polygraphs are not admissible as definitive proof, the test further justified deeper investigation. The LAPD's Financial Crimes Division was tasked with auditing the GoFundMe account established in Tyrone's name. While over $50,000 had been raised from public donations intended to support ransom payments or search efforts, $25,000 had been quietly transferred to a personal savings account under Melinda's name. When questioned, she claimed the move was to protect the funds from potential fraud or misuse, citing prior online scams she had read about. However, search warrants for Melinda's devices, executed in early March, led to a discovery that reframed the entire investigation. Forensic analysts recovered a series of encrypted text messages between Melinda and a contact identified as Andre Carson. The communication began as early as November 2022, months before Tyrone's disappearance. Initial exchanges appeared casual, discussing financial pressures and relationship frustrations. As weeks progressed, the tone shifted toward planning and coordination. In one decrypted message dated December 17, Melinda wrote, "He says he wants out. I think I'm ready to let him go. But if we do this, it has to look real." Carson responded, "Real is what I do. You'll get what you want. Just keep feeding me info." The thread contained multiple references to Tyrone's habits, schedule, and financial status. There were discussions about access to bank accounts, the GoFundMe strategy, and possible outcomes if Tyrone went through with his staged disappearance. At no point in the texts did Melinda express concern for Tyrone's safety, rather, her focus remained on achieving distance from what she described as a miserable, collapsing life. When confronted with this evidence during a formal interview on March 6, Melinda initially denied knowing Andre Carson. She claimed the messages were fabricated and that someone must have hacked her device. However, after being presented with location data placing her phone and Carson's at the same coffee shop in Culver City on 3 separate dates, she began to shift her story. Eventually, Melinda requested legal counsel. 2 days later, through her attorney, she agreed to a recorded statement under the condition of partial immunity, which was ultimately denied by prosecutors. In that interview, she admitted that she had made contact with Carson after learning about Tyrone's plan to fake his kidnapping. She claimed Tyrone had confided in her during a late-night argument, revealing his desire to escape their life together. Melinda asserted, "I didn't want him dead, I just wanted him gone. I thought if I helped it happen, I could start over. I never imagined it would go this far." She confessed to providing Carson with logistical information about Tyrone's whereabouts, how he planned to communicate, and when he would be most vulnerable. In exchange, she expected a share of the ransom money and a clean break from a marriage she no longer believed in. Her confession came too late to alter the outcome of the case. Prosecutors charged Melinda Ellis with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. The weight of the digital evidence, financial transfers, and her own admissions formed the basis of a case that would ultimately lead to her conviction. The betrayal stunned those who had supported Melinda in the early days of the investigation. Her church community, once vocal in their prayers and donations, distanced themselves. Friends described feeling manipulated. One neighbor told reporters, "We were all fooled. We thought she was grieving, she was planning." On the morning of March 3, 2023, a construction crew working near Vernon, a sparsely developed industrial zone southeast of downtown Los Angeles, reported a suspicious odor coming from a sealed storage container on a long-abandoned job site. LAPD units responded to the scene. Inside the container, partially covered by a blue tarp and surrounded by discarded insulation materials, they found the body of Tyrone Ellis. He had been deceased for several days. The autopsy, conducted by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner Coroner's Office, concluded that the cause of death was asphyxiation by manual strangulation. Additional injuries documented in the report included bruising consistent with prolonged restraint, shallow lacerations, and signs of starvation and dehydration. Toxicology revealed no drugs in his system. In the days following the discovery, detectives finalized the reconstruction of Tyrone's final movements. Using time-stamped security footage, recovered messages from burner phones, and statements from informants connected to Andre Carson's circle, a grim timeline emerged. After luring Tyrone under the guise of aiding his staged disappearance, Carson held him at multiple temporary locations across Los Angeles County. Surveillance footage from a storage facility in Whittier showed Carson accessing a unit late at night with a man resembling Tyrone in tow. GPS tracking of a rental van placed Carson at the Vernon site around February 27, the presumed date of Tyrone's death. Investigators believe that following the failed ransom attempt, Carson saw no further use for Tyrone and killed him to eliminate a loose end. On March 5, Carson was apprehended near Blythe, California, while attempting to cross into Arizona. He was pulled over on Interstate 10 in a borrowed vehicle registered to a former associate. Inside the car, authorities recovered multiple phones, fake IDs, and a loaded firearm. Carson was taken into custody without incident and extradited to Los Angeles within 48 hours. He was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and extortion. Prosecutors from the LA County District Attorney's Office filed notice that they would seek the maximum penalty. At the same time, Melinda Ellis was formally charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. The joint trial began in September 2023 and lasted 4 weeks. During the proceedings, prosecutors laid out a stark narrative. Tyrone Ellis, overwhelmed by personal debt and emotional strain, attempted to fake his own kidnapping. His wife, Melinda, betrayed him by secretly aligning with Andre Carson, a con artist who then exploited the scheme for personal gain. Carson's defense team claimed he had not intended to kill Tyrone, characterizing the death as unplanned and blaming panic. The jury rejected this defense. Digital evidence, including chat transcripts, GPS data, financial records, and Melinda's confession, formed a solid foundation for the prosecution. Witness testimony from forensic analysts, law enforcement officers, and Carson's acquaintances further bolstered the case. In October 2023, the jury returned unanimous verdicts. Andre Carson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Melinda Ellis was sentenced to 27 years in state prison. Tyrone's funeral, held in a private cemetery outside Pasadena, was sparsely attended, with only a few co-workers and extended family members present. There was no formal church service, and no eulogy was delivered. The ceremony lasted less than 30 minutes. Tyrone was buried in a plain casket next to a plot reserved for his parents. The story of Tyrone Ellis concluded not with resolution but with a grim sense of inevitability. A man who attempted to outmaneuver failure by vanishing found himself caught in a trap of his own making, tightened by betrayal and sealed by the actions of a predator he had invited into his plans. He didn't escape his life. He didn't reinvent it. He didn't even buy time. He died trying to run from it. And in the end, no one truly won.